my name is Paul Pater. I'm an emergency department nurse at the University of Illinois Chicago Hospital. I'm also the co-chief steward for the bargaining unit for the Illinois Nurses Association there, and I'm the chair of the Political Action Committee for the Illinois Nurses Association statewide.
All right, so what made you kind of get into the political side of nursing?
I think it's really important to understand that politics is more than just the kind of like bipolar conversations we have on a regular basis, with like the left is crazy and the right's out of their mind. Like we don't need to do that. Politics has a purpose, and like we can enrich our lives using that process. Politics is just a process, and engaging with the process is incredibly frustrating, but can oftentimes produce fruitful results. So one of the things that I'm working on right now is a nurse ratio bill. So we're calling the Safe Patient Limits Act, and what it does is it limits the number of nurses or number of patients a nurse can have at any one time. And studies after study after study after study have shown that if you decrease the number of patients a nurse can have, it increases positive outcomes, it decreases medical errors, decreases things like sepsis, decreases, it increases patient satisfaction, which is all the rage these days. Everybody's worried about their Press-Ganey scores, but they don't want to like do the action. Hospitals want to spend more money on like spa services, it feels like, than they do on nursing. And resources. So I think it's really important that we as a profession start to have a genuine conversation about burnout and what that looks like and how do we fix things like that. And I think something like the Safe Patient Limits Act and nursing ratios is going to help in that fight.
Yeah, definitely. I think something like burnout or a lot of nursing issues, when you boil it down, comes down to staffing.
Right, it really does. So, people are leaving the profession because the job is just too hard sometimes. In Illinois, we have 180,000 registered nurses. Only 130 are actually working. And those aren't people who have just retired. Those are people who've left because they're too burned out. They're not receiving enough for themselves. And in nursing, you're constantly taught to sacrifice. Like we're supposed to be completely selfless all the time. And when you do that, there's nothing left for you when you go home. And like that's not a dignified life. That's not something that is going to be that you can carry into the long term. Because if you just keep churning out all these bitter old nurses at the end of their careers, people are going to see them. People aren't going to want to come into the profession.
So what does it look like trying to affect change as a staff nurse who's currently working, and what are the steps there?
So my days are pretty long. After I work 8, 12, or 16-hour shift, on my off days, I'll be doing things like organizing conference calls to state and House legislators, or Senate and House legislators in the state. I'll be contacting those legislators on my own as well, organizing with my union on the best strategies to enact a change like this, and talking to stakeholders, like talking to other nurses, talking to other unions, talking to patients themselves about what they think about these sorts of changes and how they think that something like this might be beneficial. And how we make sure we're not leaving anybody out, because, pardon me. One of the bigger concerns is that, with a bill like this, like how a hospital they'll cut ancillary staff. They'll cut, janitors, and nurses will have to, mop the floors now. With the bill that we've written now, we've made it very clear that the hospitals aren't allowed to do that. And having those kind of like serious conversations with other unions about making sure that their staff are protected too is really important.
Yeah, that's funny that you bring that up, because there's numerous places I've worked where there's things like that it's almost like any job that's not being taken care of gets kind of like, we'll have the nurses do it.
Right. They love, like, management loves to dump things on nursing because it's all about saving money. Like, that's what the profession has come down to, unfortunately. It's come down to, well, the medicine doesn't want to deal with these sepsis alerts, let's make nursing do it. We don't have enough janitorial staff, throw the nurse some cavi wipes and they can wipe down the bed. And every bed in the department, they can do that too. I strictly believe nursing should be doing nursing duties. I think it is management's job to reduce non-nursing duties wherever possible. And you're finding, which is so crazy because you have all of these hospitals making a ton of money since the implementation of the ACA.
Explain the
hundreds
ACA
of
real
millions
quick.
of dollars.
I think a lot of people don't really know.
So so Obamacare, or the Affordable Care Act, has enabled people to buy private insurance at a more affordable rate than they were previously, and other people became eligible to purchase private insurance, which was not the case before. Things with problems with pre-existing conditions, or just honestly too high of a rates that people could afford. So since you've seen that, along with the increase in payments of Medicare and Medicaid, you've seen this spike where hospitals have made hundreds of millions of dollars over the last 5 years, but you don't see any of that money kind of going into nursing. The doctors are making more money now, but you don't see that money trickling down to the resources that nurses need, or to ancillary staff. The nurse techs aren't getting more money, the clerks aren't getting more money, and all of that money is staying at the top. So you have your nursing administrators, your CEOs, your VPs, your CNOs. They're making more money, especially at the private hospitals, and doctors are getting paid more, but nursing isn't seeing that jump in pay either, which is unfair. That's unjust. Pardon. So one of the bigger problems there, though, is people aren't organized to ask, not to just ask, but to demand better wages. And you're seeing a bigger increase in union membership over the past 2 to 3 years. And along with that union membership increase, you're seeing wages rise, which is not a coincidence. When you have a collective action, you can demand something for your services. People are going to take you more seriously. And for the people who are like, well, why does everything have to be about money? Listen, I love being a nurse and I love sacrificing the things that I have to do for my patients. But at the end of the day, my sacrifice does not pay for my light bill. It doesn't pay for my car insurance, and it doesn't pay for me to buy groceries. I should have something a little bit nicer too. Like, I want to take a vacation every once in a while. We have hard jobs and we deserve to have a break. We deserve to have a little padding there. Every working person deserves to have a little space between, survival and being homeless. Yeah.
And you're right though. The trick in nursing is that, like, we have kind of been conditioned with this idea of like, oh, it's all self-sacrifice. This is a calling from God, and money has nothing to do with it.
Right, and which is, the roots of that are so completely misogynistic. Like, it totally comes from the fact that, like, nurses, this used to be solely a profession for women, and doctors were men only. And we're still seeing the creep of the patriarchy into nursing even to this day, and that's something that needs to change. We need to fight to change that. It's not going to go away on its own. Yeah.
Okay. So when it comes to that fight, when we talk about things like the staffing ratio, and we were talking about Massachusetts earlier,
right?
And kind of all the propaganda that went out there when we were voting on that. And
Nurses voted against their own interests in Massachusetts. It's crazy. So the American Medical Association, the American Nursing Association, along with other private companies and organizations, insurance and pharmacy, big pharma, all that stuff. They spent, I believe it was like $24 million on the ballot initiative in Massachusetts for patient ratios, and unfortunately that propaganda worked, and nurses and patients lost out.
And their argument was basically that the hospitals can't afford to get more nurses, so ER wait times would be worse for the patient, and
right, which is so crazy.
There's a lot of spin there.
That's a ton of spin, because this is truly all about control and money, and management and your hospital CEO doesn't want to be dictated to on where they need to set their budgets, right? So, it is actually hurtful to me that the American Nurses Association chose a side in this fight, chose the wrong side in this fight. They're supposed to be standing up for nurses, but so clearly drew a line in the sand saying, we're with management, we're with hospital CEOs, we're with big money and big insurance, big pharma, and we don't really care about nursing. We care about the people who are in charge of nursing. Once again, it all boils down to money. So the American Nurses Association, runs the magnet program, and which is about outcomes for the most part, but at the same time, it is an advertising tool for hospitals, and hospitals spend millions of dollars on not just applying for magnet, but upkeep in magnet status. I think it's really disingenuous to say that hospitals don't have the money to provide for extra nursing staff or even to pay their current nursing staff appropriately when they're spending millions of dollars on these kind of like gold star badge awards that don't really mean anything. If your hospital wasn't up to par, the state would shut them down. If your hospital wasn't right, there are other, JCO and other organizations that actually have fining power and have regulation power over your hospital would do something about that. So this is all, it's all an illusion.
It's a show, yeah.
Yeah, it's a show. It doesn't actually mean that the nurses at this place are better than the nurses at that place. It honestly means the nurses here are trained more like circus animals here than they are at other institutions.
All right. So steps. All right. So if collectively as a profession here, we're like, okay, how do we make progress and move things the right way? What are some practical steps? You're involved directly.
Yeah, and that wasn't always the case. So I had to find my way to getting to this place. And in order to do something like this, one, having a union makes it just that much easier to kind of get involved with these sorts of issues, because unions are there for their membership. They're there to give you essentially a loudspeaker to talk about things that are important, and that's what they've been able to do for me. But I work in grassroots politics on the side, so one of the biggest things to do is just having conversations with people. Having honest conversations with people on a regular basis is the very first steps. And then getting to the point where it's, well, this is frustrating, what are we going to do about it? People start to form groups then. So whether that's, like a Facebook group, or if it's, like a text message thread, people don't seem to realize how much value they have as just a singular person, and what they can do with that power. You can really do a lot all by yourself. 15 people can make a lot of noise in a lot of different institutions. You'd be surprised how much you can get done with just 15 people. When I went down to Springfield to lobby for our bill, the Safe Patient Limits Act, we were able to get 100 people down there. But, it was essentially like 5 people talking about what are we going to do? How are we going to do this? So, we dedicated our own spare time to sitting down and figuring out how do we get these people together? How do we engage our legislators? And it was just honestly a series of phone calls and asking people. And they're like, hey, you care about this. I care about this too. Let's go do this together.
Yeah.
And it's really as simple as that. It's literally just getting off your ass, calling somebody and being like, hey, let's go do this. And it seems scary. Like, that's the thing. It's like all this stuff seems super intimidating. Your legislators are way more afraid of you than you should be of them. They are terrified of you, and you need to use that as leverage because they know that the only way they get back in office is if they don't piss you off.
Yeah. So this bill that's being worked on, how do we support this? If someone's watching this and they're like, okay.
One of the things you can do is you can contact me directly. My information will be maybe here.
Yeah, we'll put it right.
All right, great. What we can do is we can talk about who's your state legislator, who's your state senator, who can you go and bug? And can you bring 2 or 3 or 4 or 10 of your nursing friends with you? Because, this stuff is important. This stuff will literally save lives. That's the biggest thing about this. It's not like, oh no, let's get a dog park in this area. No, like we're doing something that is going to fundamentally alter nursing care in this state. And ultimately something we want to use as a blueprint to move it nationwide. California was the first to do it, and you're seeing unions in other states bargaining for it, demanding ratios and getting that in their contracts. What up, New York? What up, Ohio State Nurses Union? Good on you. Just going out there and demanding these things of legislators, making a lot of noise is what gets shit done. Sitting, complaining about it online, feels great to let that stuff out, but boots on the ground, marching on an office, that is how you get change.
All right, man. I'll make sure we get your info in here so we can get
Awesome.
involved then.
Yeah, man, I appreciate it. Thank you. Thanks.
I probably made you late for work.